Alright, fine. I admit it. I have some commitment issues. Sometimes I just feel the need to explore what the market has to offer. You know what I mean? Which is why I'm back to maining Superlight. I've been using this guy on and off for the past few months. I've made plenty of content surrounding it, shit on it quite a bit. But really, after going back to it for this whole past week, it's good. Though this poses the question, is it still worth picking up when you have something like the Model D wireless available for half the price, yet in my opinion, still checking off pretty much all the boxes that this does for gamers? Let's get into it. First off, weight is the big advantage to the Superlight, with mine coming in at precisely 60 grams. This has got to be one of, if not the lightest gaming mice that you can get your hands on, but it's not something you can fully appreciate until you've used something heavier. In this case, the Model D comes in at around 69, 9 grams more, which is definitely noticeable. To cut down on the weight, Glorious implemented this honeycomb design with the holes on the back and the bottom, and it still comes in at heavier than Superlight, which I think Logitech deserves a little credit for. I found that I much prefer using the Superlight when playing games like Valorant because I feel like there's less in between me and the game, making those quick flicks is a breeze. I'm probably crazy, but I swear I've been doing better with it. With that said though, I really enjoy using the Model D when sniping, in single player, or just slower paced games. The weight allows me to hold on to the mouse better and focus more on these small precise movements as opposed to ones that are just really based on reaction. For longer gaming sessions, both are comfortable, but I think the ergonomic shape of the Model D does a better job at keeping it that way. It's raised more towards the left side of the mouse and creates a more comfortable spot to rest your thumb. I've used the MX Master 2S for a couple years now, and switching between it and other gaming mice I've had, I always miss the thumb rest, so having an option like this from Glorious is awesome. It's worth noting though that the Model D is only a right-handed mouse because of this, while the G Pro X has a consistent shape around, making it ambidextrous. There's still only buttons on the left side, but if you are left-handed, it'll still be usable. The Superlight has this potato-like shape that is consistent throughout and is what I think is a very safe pick because pretty much everyone will be fine with it, whereas with what Glorious has, it's awesome for that group of people who do like the ergonomic shape, but for most gamers, it's not something they're really asking for. I think that both mice are great for use with a palm grip, but the Model D being much larger can also be used with a fingertip grip. This is generally what I end up playing with, so the Superlight definitely feels a bit on the smaller side. The Model D will be best for anyone with medium to large sized hands and can be a really great option for those who like what the Superlight offers, but it's just too small for them. I can't say that I've had problems using either for long periods of time. They're honestly both incredibly comfortable, but with the way the Model D shape wraps around my hand and provides more ergonomics, I prefer it if I'm pulling a LEGO Star Wars all-nighter. I went with the white versions of each mouse, and man, do they look great. Purely speaking about aesthetics, it's not even close. Logitech definitely takes the cake. You just have this super sleek pure white plastic finish with the small silver G logo and the black and white scroll wheel. It's super minimal and something I've really appreciated. It's able to sit in my setup and not scream gamer. Same with the G Pro X headset, it just looks so clean and doesn't take away from the vibes I'm trying to go for. There's no lighting on the mouse, which I don't really mind because it does make it lighter and allows for longer battery life. The Model D has this honeycomb design in order to shut off some of the weight, and while it's grown on me for sure, I can't say I'm in love with it. Though the bottom is pretty cool, and if you're looking at it from a right angle, it's dope. There is some lighting on here with 2 strips on each side and 1 zone underneath the scroll wheel. You then have the white casing with the black scroll wheel, side buttons, and DPI button. I really like the logo on the left side, and from the front, the two mice are actually quite similar looking. Though, when you're looking at it from this angle, you'll notice something that Glorious included, that Logitech just ignored. USB-C. Alright, fine. Maybe it doesn't really matter because they're both wireless, but every time that I have to charge this guy, there's no charging dock, so I have to go rummaging around for a micro USB cable, which none of my tech these days uses, just to charge this. I really think that when you're paying a premium price of $150, that this should just be a given. I did pick up a third-party dock, which is only like 30 bucks that replicates the Vipers. You just gotta plop it on with the bottom foot removed and plug it into a port on your PC. The magnets inside of the mouse can charge it, and you don't have to use micro USB. Though the included cable is pretty nice and designed to only go in one way. If you do opt to play with it wired at any point, the cable won't get in your way, but of course, using the included USB receiver, you can plug it into any available port on your PC. If you're having any connection issues, I recommend using the extender dongle, but for me, this is never something I felt the need to use with either the Superlight or Model D. The cable you get from Glorious is nothing special, but very lightweight, so if you ever plan to use it wired, you're not going to have a bad experience. To use it wireless, again, you do get this USB receiver, but my only complaint with it is that there's nowhere in the mouse itself to store it, which is definitely a little annoying for me as I do switch between a bunch of mice all the time. Battery life on both mice is pretty impressive, but with the Superlight lacking lighting, it will last much longer than if you do opt to use it on the Model D. Logitech promises around 70 hours of life, which I'd say is pretty accurate. I don't have to charge this thing all too often, but then Glorious promises 71 with lighting disabled. I've been using it with a static blue color, which does make for a hit in battery life, but I'm still not charging it anywhere near as much as the Viper, which just shreds their battery. As long as you're plugging them in every week or so, you really shouldn't have to worry about either dying on you. Build quality isn't an issue from either Logitech or Glorious. With all my use, I really do feel that both of these are solid. They're each made of a smooth plastic that feels great in the hands and has a decent grip to it. Neither is quite like the Viper, but you do get some grips included if you feel the need. Though it really is a bummer to see that both of these mice only have buttons on the left side, especially when the Superlight is supposedly ambidextrous. I find the buttons to be of a much higher quality on the Model D, and being larger, they're far easier to click, whereas the ones in the Superlight feel pretty mushy. The Superlight scroll wheel looks super slick with its white design and black grippy texture. The Model D's doesn't look quite as nice, but functionally I do like it more. The grips feel nicer, and the scroll itself is very smooth, but it is larger and isn't as easy to press. Logitech is using Omron 20mm switches in the Superlight, and Glorious has custom switches made in collaboration with Kale packed into the Model D, rated for 80 million clicks. I prefer the feel to the Model D switches as they provide a very crisp click and noticeably more feedback, though to me it feels like it takes a little more force to actuate. I still like those in the Superlight, but it's worth taking the reliability of these into consideration. I still haven't ran into any double clicking issues, but it does still happen, whereas I haven't heard of anything similar with the Model D. But putting that aside, they're honestly not drastically different from one another and both feel very responsive. To give an idea of what each is like, here's a quick sound test. Both sensors have felt super responsive, with Logitech using their Hero sensor that has a max DPI of 25,000, and Glorious collaborating with Pixar to bring their BAM sensor with a max DPI of 19,000. When you want to adjust the DPI, the Model D makes it so simple, with the DPI button being right on top. For whatever reason, there's no DPI button found on the Superlight, meaning that unless you want to bind one of your side buttons to cycling, you'll have to go in the software and manually change it. But back to the sensors themselves, the difference between either is so negligible that it's really not something that should be affecting your purchasing decision. What's more important is the overall glide of each mouse. I've been super impressed with the stock PTFE feet on the Model D since I started using it. You get some extra ones included in the box, but honestly, it's so smooth on my mouse pad that I haven't once felt the need to use them. The Superlights aren't bad, but not all that impressive for the price you're paying. You get an interchangeable puck that you can throw on the bottom to give some more glide to it, but it's not that much of a difference. I know you can buy third-party skates, which a lot of people have recommended, but just speaking of the experience straight out of the box, the Model D wins in my opinion with no questions. But for anyone watching that does actually use third-party skates with the Superlight, let me know which ones they are, your experiences, because it is something that I'm interested in checking out and potentially making some videos on. The last thing to talk about with these two is their software, though both are pretty light, so I'm not going to spend too much time on it. The Model D is using Glorious Core, which is a super simple program to use. You can go in and quickly adjust your lighting, bind the side buttons, set the different DPI stages, and adjust things like debounce time and pulling rate. For the Superlight is using G-Hub. Going in, there's not really too much going on. You can set your DPI stages, but again, with there not being a set DPI button, the process gets a bit more complicated. Tabbing over, you can bind the buttons, and within there, set a G-Shift key, so you're actually able to adjust your sensitivity straight from the mouse. Luckily, both mice can save the settings to their onboard memory, and great to see is that the Model D saves its lighting profile as well, so you're not losing all the settings when the software isn't running. Looking at you, Razer. So going back to what I asked in the beginning of the video, is the Superlight worth it when you have the Model D wireless as an option? Honestly, it starts to become a much harder sell when you consider that the Model D is $80, nearly half the price of the Superlight's MSRP. I really think that if you do like the ergonomic design that Glorious offers, it's a no-brainer. There's just nothing drastically better that warrants the pretty significant price hike from Logitech. The Superlight definitely has its advantages though of a cleaner design and lighter build, making it much better for games like Valorant and Warzone. Those quick movements are much easier for me and almost feels like I do a little better with it. If you are a competitive player and having even the slightest edge over your enemies is a big deal to you, then I would say that the Superlight is probably a better choice. Though in my opinion, I think the Model D is much more comfortable and I prefer it for longer gaming sessions, especially when playing single player games. Both of the sensors feel super responsive and neither switch is bad, but I do like the feel and reliability of the ones from Glorious. Battery life isn't an issue on either. With the Superlight lacking lighting, it will generally last much longer than the Model D, but of course by just turning it off, it ends up being more or less the same. I want to know, which mouse do you think is the better choice? And also just what games are you playing these days? But with that, I've been Cole, and I appreciate everyone who has made it to this point in the video. If you enjoyed, make sure to drop a like and subscribe to the channel to see more tech content in the very near future. Alright, I'm headed out. Take care.